Hi, kids. Welcome
Hello.
back. Haven't seen you for a little while. I think some of you have been on vacation, and maybe some of you just did other things at home. That's always a good time, too, right? Yeah. And it is spring all over the place.
Yes.
My tulips are up. The robins are here. I saw a couple fat ones. I couldn't believe it. I said, "Where did you stop on your way to Iowa? You what?
I found a good restaurant somewhere.
McDonald's or something? I don't know. Maybe Earl May.
Oh, okay. I was going to say McWormville or something.
Yes, McWormville. They must have found something because that one, just the one I saw, but it was really fat. And I thought, you don't have your winter. You don't. No, you've lost that. Oh well. Okay, good for you. And of course the rabbits and they're out like crazy.
The squirrels are like so busy.
They are just in the back of my house. They are crazy. They're up and down those trees. Like, who's chasing you? Slow down.
It probably just feels good to get out and just
Could be.
run.
Could be.
You know,
Could
kids,
be.
you like to run, don't you? Just go
Yes.
outside and run.
Get the willies out.
Yeah,
That's what I
yes.
have to say to Braxton. You get outside and get your willies out. I
Yep.
got to have those willies out. I can't stand it. You get outside. And that usually works. Well, we are going to start this, what do we say, lesson? This
Lesson
session.
Lesson session.
Lesson
It's a lesson
session.
session. If you can
Don't
say that
say
with
that
us.
too many times, you're going to get tongue-tied. But it's all going to be about what we call the Holy Week, the 7 days of Holy Week. Jesus was busy.
He was busy.
Through
Busy. He
here.
was before then, but he was really busy this week.
through this week. He had so many activities. It was
And some were good. Well, yeah, and some were not so good for him. Yeah.
right. Yes,
Turned out good for us,
absolutely,
but-
absolutely. And the thing of it is, if you copy off the little pictures, Angie made them into a picture book,
There's a section
coloring
that starts
book,
with Jesus, and it says Happy Easter. And if you print all those after that and staple them together, you can follow along with our story real nice tonight.
Absolutely. So Palm Sunday is the first event here that we are talking about. It's one of those things I wish, and it could never have happened, but I wished I could have been there.
It would have been so neat to see that, wouldn't it? It just,
But the point is, we would have had to understand all of it, Angie, and we don't.
we don't.
We
No.
couldn't. We still don't, and we have all Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John
We
who
have
tell
all the stuff to tell us.
about
Right.
it, and we would have found it hard to. I would have found it hard to be there.
I think we'd have been like the people
Yes.
that were there. They were happy when Jesus first came, but then as we go into the week, we find out they kind of switched gears and turned on Jesus. So,
They did a 360, right?
so
went.
we'd probably have been very
Yep.
similar to their way of thinking,
Yep, for sure.
but it was kind of like a parade.
Oh, my word, yes. Jesus in
parade.
getting ready for this parade. Yes, I don't know if it was in some of the notes here or some of the notes that I'm collecting that said he was well aware of what was going to happen this whole week to him.
Right.
And he, because he was human, was hoping that the people would understand what kind of king he was. He was not going to be this king riding into Jerusalem with a beautiful white or purple thing with a big crown on his head and on a big white stallion. That wasn't going to happen.
That's what the people thought
That's what
was
the
going to
people
happen.
thought.
They
Yes.
thought he was going to have a kingdom right there on the earth, right where they
Right.
were at, and get rid of the
Right.
Romans that were ruling
Right.
over them.
Yes.
That's what they thought. And
Yes.
we would have probably thought the same
We
thing
would
too,
have
had
too.
we been there.
Yes.
But it was a little different. Jesus knew what was
He knew
really
right.
happening.
So one of to me the coolest things, he knows he's going to ride through the town, right? So the Gospels tell us that he told his disciples to go to a person in town, in the village there, and say, untie. I mean, they didn't say anything first. They untied.
Untie it.
Right. Untie the donkey, but it had to have a baby donkey with it. What?
You know what my little book says here? That we're going to kind of read through the book as we go. It's called The Story of Easter. And it says the first Passover happened when God's people left Egypt a long time ago. And that's why they were, all these
That's why
people were
people
getting
in town.
together in Jerusalem because they were celebrating the Passover feast. And every year God's people celebrated that feast
Right.
together. So
Right.
one year Jesus and his disciples went to Jerusalem to celebrate the
Yes.
Passover.
Yes.
But before they got there, like you said, Jesus said to his followers, go into town and find a young donkey colt, untie it and bring it to me. If anyone asks where you are taking it, say, the master needs it. When the men got back with the donkey colt, they spread their coats on its back, and Jesus climbed on the colt. Now, we're not sure which one he actually rode. This is a storybook, so he may have ridden Mama Donkey. It depends on how old, I suppose, baby donkey was.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if it was her colt, he probably could have been a yearling or something. Maybe he
Right.
could have been
Right.
ridden. I don't know.
Maybe he wasn't broke to ride,
Yeah.
so they left
So-
the baby and took mom. I don't know.
don't know.
I don't know either.
We don't know.
But yeah, this isn't in your packet. But yeah, here's a picture of Jesus going
Yeah.
down there on that donkey. Now, the other picture that you have in your picture book, okay. All right, that one, yeah. Okay, that looks like a kind of a bigger horse to me, but
Yeah.
does it matter?
Not
No, but
get the idea.
Yes, the other thing about this is what the Old Testament said was going to happen to.
Prophecy fulfilled.
Yes, right.
It says the donkey started to clip-clop through the town, you know.
Yep.
People came running, and they took off their coats, and they threw them on the ground in front of the donkey for him to walk on.
Right.
And then if they didn't have a coat or something, maybe they took palm branches like these over here, picked some of them and laid them down, kind of made a fancy carpet for him to walk on.
Right.
And they said, Hosanna, praise God.
Right.
And then some of them remembered the scriptures that said, your king is coming, sitting on the colt of a donkey. And that is from the Old Testament.
Right.
It
Right.
was prophesied way, way back when.
Way back when. Only when they would do this for kings and so forth. I mean, they did that for kings too.
Right.
But for Jesus, he came very
Very
plain,
humble.
very humble. Yes, he did.
Yeah, a
And-
king would come with a lot of pomp and circumstance and probably soldiers and trumpet players
Oh, my
with
word,
music
yes.
and everything.
There
and
probably would maybe be black horses ahead of
of
him.
the white horses.
Right,
and-
and whatever. It was,
Yes.
it was a parade to remember.
Right.
Yeah, a
Right.
big deal.
So this was a pretty quiet, simple parade.
It
really.
was. But
But that's how Jesus was.
yes, exactly. And he didn't want it any
No.
other way.
No.
So anyway, what comes next then, Miss Angie? Do we
Well,
have- so
let's see.
Jesus, okay, I know one other thing.
What's that?
I don't know if we have a picture of that. Okay. Jesus went into Jerusalem on the donkey. Okay. Do you know anything about the money changers?
I do.
And that happened during this week.
Happened during the week. We're not sure exactly what day. We could say it was Monday. We don't
Sure.
know.
Sure.
But Jesus went into the temple, and
Yes.
all these people coming from different places, they would do sacrifices in the temple of the
Right.
pigeons and the doves and the sheep and the rams
Mm-hmm.
and all the different things. And instead of bringing those animals with them, there was a place in the temple where you could buy these things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm guessing the people from the different areas maybe had different currencies of money.
Right.
They didn't all use the same, like
Right.
we do in the United States of America, all have the
Same.
American money. So they would got to the temple, and they would have to exchange their money
Right.
for what was being used in the temple.
Exactly.
And so they were kind of making a business out of this. It wasn't so much to honor God anymore. It was to
No.
make a business, to
No.
make a buck, buying and selling their animals and making money. And Jesus came and he saw that, and he got angry.
Upset.
He was very angry. And he went through the temple and he flipped up the tables with the money on, and the money flew all over. And what did he say? He said, "You are making my house, my Father's house, a den of robbers."
And it is a house of prayer.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
He chased all those people out. And I read that it was kind of symbolic, which means, how can I describe that? It's easy in my brain. How do I tell you?
We can make it mean something else, kind of.
Right. Jesus told them, this is my house of prayer. In one place I read, he came the night before and saw what they were doing, and he didn't like it because there were people in there that were cheating, and they might exchange animals that were not what the sacrifice should be. And the people who had very little couldn't come in. And that was bothersome for him too.
Sure.
So he turned around and went to the house of his friends, Lazarus, Mary, and Martha.
Okay.
And he stayed there. And then he went back the next day, and the same thing was going on.
happening.
And he thought, I'm guessing that this is enough of this. The Bible, way back in the prophecies of Isaiah said, this is a house of prayer. And it's for the whole world to pray in. You can't be in here when the rest of the people out in the courtyards can't get in to my Father's house of prayer because you're taking up all the space with these things that you're cheating with.
Sure.
And not being
Yeah, plus if you've got a pen of animals or something that
right.
you're selling.
Exactly.
You know,
so you can't be in there.
And it would be smelly and.
Right. So he got
like-
them all out, and then the people who were blind, who were lame, who had some kind of physical ailments could come in and pray. And I thought, I love that idea because that's what our churches are supposed to be like too. We are supposed to not fill it with just people who have their own business here. No, this church is a house of prayer.
Sure.
And the doors are supposed to be open to anyone who want to come in, who have a desire to come in. That was something I learned that I, all these years, don't think I
Honestly,
knew.
I don't think I knew that.
I don't think I knew that before. And that made me feel good that Jesus was, shall we say, righteously angry. He had a reason to
Right.
be upset.
Right.
This is not what is supposed to be going on during Passover in my Father's house of prayer. So he cleaned that up.
He
And
took care of that.
yes, and that's a symbolic thing for our churches. Our churches are his temple too, and we need to maybe clean it out.
Clean it up a little bit, huh?
Sometimes, yeah, so that all who want to come in can. And if we don't keep moving, we're not going to get through all this stuff. We have a lot of stuff, kids. Hang on for a big ride. Okay.
Well, I was
so-
going to tell you, in your packet of stuff, before we go on to the next part, there's a pattern for a palm leaf. It says Hosanna on it. Helps if I hold it the right way. I printed mine on green paper so I could go like this. You can color it, cut it out. And then there's a picture of him riding on the donkey. And then there's also a fun word find to go with that session too. So
Right.
there's that. But
Yes.
now we'll move on to the Lord's Supper, the Last Supper that Jesus had on earth with his disciples. And as we talked about, this was the Feast of the Passover, and this was something that they had done for years and years, these people. They celebrated getting out of Egypt, the night they went out of Egypt. And so there was special food that they had.
Yes.
We're not going to go into all of them, but I know they had lamb.
Yes.
They had bread, but their bread was not fluffy bread like this. It was probably more like a tortilla,
Cracker.
a cracker, something flat.
No salt on it.
Yeah. They had horseradish, I believe it was,
Yes.
and parsley and a boiled egg.
Egg.
I can't remember. That's about it, I think. But they all had special meanings, all these things. So Jesus and his disciples were eating the Passover dinner. And so before that, though, we talked about this a little bit the other time, one of the last times,
yeah, we
about
did.
serving. Jesus knew that he was going to be leaving them soon. So, and this is after supper. I always thought it was before supper, but
No,
maybe it was after
I
supper.
think it was after.
He removed his outer cloak, his outer coat, and he wrapped a towel around his waist, and then he took the bowl of water and he washed the disciples' feet. And that was because their feet were dirty from the sand and the dirt. They wore sandals during this time, and so they washed their feet. And that was usually a servant's job.
Right.
And Jesus stooped down, literally stooped down, to become like a servant and serve his disciples by washing their feet. And Peter said, "You should never wash my feet." But Jesus told him, "As I have washed your feet, now you must wash each other's feet." And this was to show how to serve and love each other. And his commandment that night was to love one another. Okay?
Yeah. Also to say, I came to serve. Yes.
Again,
I came
humble,
to
like riding on the donkey.
Right,
He's
right.
very humble.
Another lesson for us. Right?
Yes.
Literally, do you have to go wash people's feet? No. That's not what this means. That's another symbol, right? This is another symbol.
Lots of symbols.
Of meaning you're doing something good that they needed to have done. That's how they cleaned up for the night.
Right.
They got their feet cleaned off.
Sure.
And so that's our cue, our
Clean
okay,
ourselves up for the night.
clean yourselves up, but also help somebody else. And that can not just mean wash their feet. That can mean help them do, I know someplace in all this stuff that I've copied off, there was pages of stuff that kids could do, just like that kindness sheet. Yes, that's what Jesus is saying here. Do unto others as you would have them do for you. So that's one of the things there too. So anyway.
So before that Last Supper, Jesus told some of the disciples to go into town because they had to have a place to have this supper.
Right, correct.
And he said, there will be a man carrying water, and you need to ask him for a room. And you know why that was unusual is because women usually carried the water. So when they saw a man carrying water, they knew that was the right man. So he led them to the house where they had their Passover meal. And so then they had the food. And a lot of times, like when we see the pictures of the Lord's Supper, there's a very famous one that we see, and they're all sitting by a table kind of like this.
Yes.
But actually back then, they would have sat, the table that they would have had, table would have been much lower, and they would have actually sat on the ground and kind of maybe even leaned on the table, kind of reclined a little bit. So, and I think somewhere where I read or saw, it was in like a U shape. And so like
More
Jesus,
than
the
a straight
leader,
table.
would have been at the bottom of the U part, and the disciples would have been around on the sides. So that's kind of neat. And so they did they ate the unleavened bread, they ate the lamb, the herbs, they had wine, grape juice. And there was 4 special times that they had to have that during that meal. We don't have all that in here, but it says Jesus and his friends, they liked the unleavened bread. And they used a sauce to dip it in. They had, that was kind of their way to make it tasty. So they were dipping the bread in the bowl of sauce, and then Jesus told them something, and that was kind of sad. And he said, someone here is really not my friend. One of you 12 guys isn't my friend. He's going to do bad things that will get me into trouble. How would you like to hear that? One of the ones who is dipping the bread in the bowl with me will betray me. Betray is kind of a tricky word. It's, how do we explain that? Kind of a friend behind your back or not a friend behind your back kind of a thing. You know, they're going to go tell
Well, they don't
somebody.
have your back for sure.
That they don't have your
They
back.
don't have
no.
your back. No. They just kind of
They're nice
selfish.
to your face.
Yes.
They're nice to your face,
Yes.
but then behind your back, when you're not around, they're not so nice, maybe? to you?
Sometimes that's how you think you're getting ahead. Judas went and made a deal, right?
Yes.
Didn't he make a deal?
But see, the leaders in Jerusalem didn't like Jesus. And they saw how the people were following him around.
Yes.
And
Yes.
they were angry about that. They didn't like that because they were jealous and whatever. So, got to find the right page here. So before the supper that night, Judas had gone to these leaders, and he says, I can tell you where Jesus is going to be. And then you can come and arrest him and take him away.
Do what you want to
Do
do.
what you want to do. What a friend, huh? And the leader says, well, we'll give you 30 pieces of silver for that. I just want you to kind of see 30 pieces of silver. Was that really worth it? I don't know what it was in dollar amount back then, but that's what 30 pieces of silver looks like.
What would he have done with
What
that?
would he have done with it?
What did he need it for?
So,
And whatever.
So Jesus had picked up the loaf of bread and at the table and thanked God for it, and then he broke it into pieces, and he gave the bread to his disciples to eat. And he said, this is my body. Every time you do this, think of me. Okay, so now that bread was not really Jesus' body.
No.
It was a symbol again of Jesus' body, because the bread was broken apart, and Jesus' body, when he died here in the next day or so, his body would kind of be broken apart by all the bad things that happened to him. And so Jesus wanted us to eat that bread and think of him as he died while we eat that bread. And then in the same way, he took the cup that they drank out of, and it could have been a community cup. I'm not really sure how that worked back then, but it was a cup. And he had the wine or the grape juice in it, and he says, this is my blood poured out to forgive the sins of many. Take it and drink it and remember me. And again, this was not Jesus' blood. It was juice. It was wine, okay? And it doesn't change. But when you drink it, it helps you to remember that Jesus' blood, he bled so much for us, that he had to die for us. And that's a way that we can see something that helps us remember that and maybe visualize it a little bit more. And so he said, the time has come for me to go away. Where I'm going, you cannot go yet. But I'm going to go to heaven and prepare a new home for you. And the disciples had no idea what he was talking about. No
We
idea.
wouldn't have either.
No.
We
No.
wouldn't have either. No.
And he said, at first you're going to be sad.
Yes.
But don't be frightened. You'll soon figure this out, and you're going to be happy again. So then Judas, by this time Judas had left, the one who was betraying him with the coins. And they headed out. Jesus had a favorite garden that he liked to go to. And it was called the Garden of Gethsemane. And Gethsemane, I can't talk it because my mouth is getting dry. It means olives, the olive presses. The olive presses and trees were there. So it was a garden full of olive trees. And the disciples went along, but he had 3 special ones that he took along with him to go further back into the garden to pray with him, Peter, James, and John. And so he said, you guys stay here, you pray here, I'm going to go over there and pray. And he went to pray. He said, tell God the Father, he says, not my will. I don't want to suffer the pain of the cross. But your will is more important, and I am ready to die if I have to.
I know what I'm supposed to do.
Yep.
I know what I'm supposed to do here. But if
There's any way we
Yeah.
don't have to do this,
yeah,
I would really,
right.
not
Yep.
want to do it.
We wouldn't either.
No.
No.
But he also was not forced to die on the cross.
No.
He came willingly to do
Right.
this for us. So that shows you how much he loves us if he was willing to die on a cross for us.
Could he have called, as the song goes, 10,000 angels?
He could have.
He could have.
He could
And
have
stopped
taken him away. and
everything in the
it'd have been
snap of a
done.
finger, and it would have been done. But he didn't, because he knew his purpose was to come here and take care of all the sins and we've talked about this many times, kids, the wrong things that we have done, the wrong things of all the people in the world. And that's what he came to do. And this week just continues on with harder things for him, doesn't it? Yes.
Well, and then while he was praying, he went back, after he's done
Oh,
praying,
right,
he went
yes.
back to his disciples, and guess what? They were sleeping. They couldn't even
He
stay
wanted
awake.
some friendly people to say,
needed some
we're here for
support.
you. We're here for you, Jesus. What is it that you need us to do? Can we get you a drink of water? Maybe can we rub your back? What can we do to make you feel better? They went to
They
sleep.
were sleeping.
We would have too.
Yep.
We would have.
So that happened 3 times.
That happened 3 times.
3 times he went to pray, and he came back and they were sleeping. And finally he said, "Okay, let's go."
Yep. This is over.
The person who's going to have me arrested is here,
Right.
so let's just
Right.
go.
Right. Jesus prayed so hard that what happened, Angie?
His sweat became blood. He
Yeah.
was blooding. He was bleeding.
Right.
Sweating
so
blood.
He was
He was
so anxious.
so-
But I wouldn't say depressed, but I'm going to put it in a way that I read. He was working through what he had to do. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
He was working through in his head what he had to do, what he came to do. Never forget that. And yeah, it was like the olive presses there in that country. They would put the olives in there, and they would have sometimes they'd have animals that walked around, and it was like a press, and it would bring it down.
Squeeze out all the oils.
Right. And that's kind of the same situation for Jesus. All the pressure of what he had to do, he was just spinning around in his own way. And instead of like the olive oil, this was blood that just dripped from him. What a thing that would have been to see. We would have stood there and said, how is this happening? What is going on here? Right? Yes. So anyway. Our
then-
next thing.
The 3rd time Jesus woke his followers, he said, "We must go." And then a big crowd of people came, a bunch of soldiers came. And Judas, one of Jesus' followers, what we talked about, was with them. And his signal to the soldiers, so that they would know which was the man to arrest, he gave Jesus a kiss on the cheek. And that was the signal for them to arrest Jesus. Well, Peter was not. Peter, one of the other disciples that was still there, he wasn't happy about this.
No.
So he had a sword on him yet. And he pulled out his sword and he cut off the ear of one of the guards. Just went, phew. Oh man, that would hurt.
Yes.
That would hurt.
That's what Peter was, though. He did things.
He was just,
spur of the moment thing.
he'd just jump
Yes.
and do something,
Yeah,
yes.
Right.
But what Jesus did is he picked up that ear and he held it back on the man's head and he healed it and he put the ear back on.
Wouldn't you think people would say, there must be something to this man? Why are we taking him
Right.
away to do this stuff?
He can put this man's cut off ear,
Ear
back on
together.
his head.
The
and then
bleeding stopped. It stayed there. Nothing happened to it. As if Peter never did that. What?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
they still didn't believe.
No.
They arrested him and took him away anyways. So yeah, if you're following in your book, we've done some of these things, but now we're kind of on this page where he's by the Roman governors. And when they arrested him, you've probably heard of trials and going to court and things like that. But they took Jesus to court, but it was a whole fake thing. It was just, they knew what they were going to do with Jesus anyway, but they went through all the motions and all the stuff, and it was mostly to humiliate him, just to make him look bad.
So you say you're a king. So you say you're going to build the temple in 3 days. So you say you came to do what? And they wanted to make a liar out of him, didn't they? Make fun.
They made fun of him.
They did. They did.
Yeah, he was taken to the house of the high priest and then to Pilate, who was the Roman governor of Judea. They went from one place and then and those places, I don't know how close they were in Jerusalem, but I'm sure you had to walk quite a ways.
To a certain degree, when we had studies with Daryl, they weren't that far apart.
They weren't that
but,
far apart.
Yeah.
But he's also been awake all night.
Right.
They've eaten the supper, they had all that business, and then they had the Last Supper, and then they went to the garden, and I presume he stayed awake all night praying.
Yes.
And
Nothing to eat.
nothing
no
to
sleep.
eat, really. You know, if you're having a little bit of whatever for your Passover, that wasn't a lot.
That wasn't real. No.
And finally, Pilate, the governor, said that he didn't think Jesus was guilty. He couldn't find anything wrong with him, but the people who hated Jesus kept yelling until Pilate finally said that Jesus had to die on the cross. Well, then the soldiers took over this was not good. So they took charge of him. They made a crown out of, guess what? It wasn't gold or silver that they put a crown of on him. They went and found, I don't know if you can see back here, but there's some sticky bushes back here. They went and found prickly bushes, and they made a crown out of it. That crown right there. Can we get that one? I'll get it. A crown like this, and it is prickly.
It's made from thorn
There's
bushes.
thorns on there. Look how long. They're a couple inches long. And they put that on Jesus' head, and they pushed it down. That hurts. They pushed it down into his head, and they made him bleed. And that had to. And you know what? During all of this, Jesus never said anything. He was quiet the whole time. And then they got a big purple robe, and they put that on Jesus, and they made fun of him because, you say you're a king, and you know.
Better, yep.
And they spit on him, and they had a whip, and they whipped him. They were so mean to Jesus. It was so
Spit at him.
Oh. And then after all that, then they made him carry his cross. And crosses are not little. They're big. They made him carry his cross to a place called Golgotha, or Calvary. And that means it's the place of the skull. And sometimes the pictures that you see, they look kind of like a skull, the mountain or the hill that they were on. You can kind of see a face in there. Whether that's why it was called that or not, but I would think maybe. And when they got there, then they laid Jesus on the cross and they nailed him to the cross. They put big nails right in his hands and in his feet. Oh, how awful. That was awful. And while he was on the cross, he said several things. They're called the 7 sayings of Jesus. And one of them, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." And he was talking about, everybody, really. The people didn't understand what they were doing. The soldiers didn't understand what they were doing, that they were trying to kill the Son of God. And he also, while he was on the cross, his disciple John was there, and his mom, Mary, was there. If you remember Mary from the Christmas story, Mary was there. And he said, "Woman, this is your son. John, this is your mom." So he was even thinking of people,
Yes.
as he's dying on the cross, making sure people are being taken care of.
Right.
Because we believe at this time that Mary's husband Joseph was gone. So she lived alone probably. And so he appointed his disciple John to take care of her so that she wouldn't be alone and, had a way of means to eat and things like that. So he was thinking of other people the whole time. And then at the end, the last thing Jesus said, "It is finished." Yeah. Well, was he just finished with all of this being humiliated and beaten and all that stuff? Is that what he was all finished with? Not really. I mean, I'm sure he felt like he was finished with it. But what he is finished is his work on earth was done. Because he was here to save us from our sins, to die on the cross, save us from our sins, so that Satan would be defeated and we can go to heaven with him someday. But everybody at the cross wasn't thinking about that at that time. No. And while he was on the cross, it was at 9 o'clock in the morning, about when they put him on, and they put one robber on one side, and then there was another robber on the other side of Jesus. So there was 3 crosses that day. And while Jesus was on the cross, it got really dark that day. It got dark from noon until 3 o'clock. Wouldn't that be weird? Have it dark in the middle of the day.
We'd be afraid of a storm. We'd think a storm was coming.
And there kind of was.
Yes, there
because
was.
Jesus died, and there was a big earthquake. And this is what's pretty cool. Is in the temple where Jesus had been earlier in the week, there was a big curtain, and it separated, like if we had a big curtain back here, and it separated that part from this part of the church. And only the high priest could go back there because that's where God was. And people couldn't talk directly to God. They had to talk through the high priest. And when Jesus died, that great big curtain across there was ripped in two. Nobody did it. It just ripped. God did it. And that made the way for people like us so we can talk to God anytime we want to. We don't have to go to a priest. We don't have to go to a minister. We don't have to go to the church to go to a special room. We can talk to Jesus, to God, whenever we want to. And that was so neat.
You know what that's like? Here we go with another
symbol.
symbol. Okay, that curtain was torn in two. It was an opening, just like Jesus opened the temple when he cleared all those people out. Isn't that something? How I love that, how it's all tied
all ties together.
Yes.
Pretty neat.
And by the way, that curtain was 60 feet wide and 30 feet tall.
That's really big.
That
That would have been a big tear.
And I read that in a book, and I thought, okay, but it was Max Lucado who said that, and he chose the nails. So he would have done his research.
I wouldn't question that at all.
No, I would not question that at all. But in my mind, that's huge. Is that as big as this?
That's bigger than this, I'll bet.
I wish you would
And
have taken the
it
time.
probably wasn't like a lace curtain. It was like a tapestry,
It
like
was.
a rug.
Heavy.
A heavy,
Heavy.
big curtain.
Yes.
Made a special way. I know, like, is it Leviticus or something? There's
It says
instructions of how they had to make this
yes,
special curtain.
when they made the
Certain
Holy of
colors of you
Yes.
know, how it all had to be. It's
dyed,
very special.
how they had to dye it, everything. Just
So
think.
when that curtain ripped in two,
Yeah.
that was a whole new thing for God's
Yes,
people.
yes.
They could come directly to
Yep.
him.
Yep, for sure, yes.
Well, it was getting to the close of that day, and Jesus was not quite gone yet. So what they did is they went and checked. I take that back. They were getting to the part of the day where they had their religious ceremonies. And so it'd be like our Sunday. And so their law was that they couldn't have people on the cross during that time. So they had to get these people down off the cross. Well, to make sure that they were dying, they would go and break their legs. It was just awful. But it was so, while their legs were so good, they could kind of push up on the cross and still kind of breathe a little bit. But if their legs were broken, then they couldn't push up anymore, and they died faster. So they went to the two robbers on both sides, and they broke their legs. But when they got to Jesus, he had already died. So they didn't need to break his legs. And that was also to fulfill a prophecy that
Yes.
none of his bones would be broken. But what they did to make sure he was dead was they took a spear and they pierced his side. And the blood ran, or not the blood, the water ran out of his side instead of the blood.
Yes.
And that was to prove that he was dead now. So now he needs to come off of the cross. And there was a man named Joseph, different Joseph than his dad. And he was a rich man from that area. They call him Joseph of Arimathea. And he was a rich man. He had a lot of money. So he had his grave made already. Some of us do that ahead of time before we pass away. We have our tomb or our tombstones and things like that all made out in the cemetery. And that's what this man had done. And it must have been a huge stone.
For a family.
Yeah. And they must have carved out the inside so that they could put people in there, you know. And it was brand new, though. Nobody in the family had died yet because there was nobody in there yet.
Right.
So Joseph and then some of his friends, some of the disciples, I suppose, helped get Jesus down, and they got him and put him in the tomb. Well, what you do with the tomb is you don't leave it open. You put a big stone in front of it, a big stone. So the Roman soldiers were probably there, and they helped close it up because finally they were happy that Jesus was dead.
Right.
He's not here to bother us anymore. So they wanted to make sure that he was dead. So they had the king's seal. They probably put like a wax or something around it maybe and put the king's seal in there to prove that it was shut. And so there was Jesus in the tomb. And the guards guarded the tomb. The soldiers
Oh,
guarded
yeah.
the tomb because they didn't want anybody to try and come in and steal the body.
And they wanted the story to stop
Yes,
about him.
yes.
Yeah, they wanted the stories to stop. They wanted to make sure nobody took his body or that he was going to rise again. They didn't want any of that kind of nonsense. That was not going to happen on their watch.
Nope.
So they had the guards sitting out in front of that stone, marching to the orders of the whoever said
Whoever's
so.
in charge.
Whoever was in charge. And there they stood in front of the stone that supposedly would have taken a lot of people to move. I don't know.
Yeah.
How-
I mean,
how did-
I don't know if you could crawl, if you crawled in there or if you walked in there, but it had to be a decent sized entryway to get in there and, get a body in there.
Well, and the people wanted to walk in there, the ladies, remember? To put,
Spices on
yes,
him.
and wrap him up in linens.
And
And you would have had to have room to do that. Yeah.
Well, and because it was getting close to their Sabbath, they didn't have time to do all that stuff.
Right.
They just had to hurry up and get the body buried. So
Right.
they didn't get time to do all the preparations
No.
like what we
Normal.
usually have done at the funeral home. So they didn't have time to do that. So then the next day, it was their holy day, so they didn't do anything. They probably were all together, all Jesus' friends, and they probably were very sad.
Yes.
Kind of like we are after somebody passes away. We get together with our family and we talk about the memories and all that kind of stuff, and that's probably what they did. And then the next day, some of the women wanted to go to the tomb. They had their spices, and they were going to put them on Jesus. Well, we talked about this big stone, and here's these three women. How were they going to get that stone rolled away?
I mean, really, ladies, really?
I don't think it was going to happen.
No.
But you know what? There was an earthquake again.
Another one.
Another earthquake.
Yes.
And an angel came from heaven and rolled that stone away. And
How
then
beautiful.
sat on that stone. And the women got there. And wouldn't you be surprised, though? I don't know what I would say if I'd get there and the stone was gone. You could walk right in, and there's an angel sitting there.
Yeah, right. That would be a bit much to understand, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Oh, boy.
And the soldiers, they were so frightened that they fell on the ground like dead men. They passed out.
Fainted when the earth. Well, they were probably afraid something was going to happen to them.
Yeah.
Because somebody might have stolen his body.
Right.
Oh
They
dear,
probably
let's
figured
not
they
look
were
in here.
in trouble.
Yeah, right.
So what did the angel say, though? He said, do not be
Not be
afraid.
afraid.
Jesus is not here. He's risen. Whoa. He what?
Say that again.
He is not here. He is risen.
I don't understand this at all.
Somebody
At
that
all.
had died was now back to life again. And he was not in the tomb where they left him.
No.
Whoa.
But there are the most beautiful words kind of out of the Bible. Do not be afraid. How many times that's
Oh,
in
it's
there?
in there so many times.
times. It was said to a lot of people, and it's worth repeating to us, isn't it?
Yes.
Put it in your head and say, do not be afraid. Jesus is with me.
Yep.
Yeah. So remember that too from this whole thing. But oh yeah.
And
those
women, they were so happy.
Yeah.
So some of them went back to the other disciples, back to the room the house where they were all gathered together, and went and told them. They went running back, and they told them.
He's
and then,
gone. He's not there.
He's not there. He's risen. Well, a couple of the disciples couldn't believe it, so they
No.
come running to the garden, to the cemetery to see it. And in the meantime, one lady stayed behind, Mary Magdalene. And she was crying. She couldn't find Jesus, didn't know where he was. And somebody came up to her and said, "Why are you crying?" And she says, Jesus is gone.
Because my
I
master-
can't find him. I don't know where he is.
I don't know if somebody took his body.
What-
I came to put the linens around and put
spices
the
and stuff?
spices on, and now he's not here.
And you know what? That man said one word. He said, Mary.
Mary.
And the way he said it, she knew right then that that was Jesus standing there.
Yes.
And boy, was she excited. She was excited. Jesus was alive again. Wow.
Which would be another confusing thing.
I mean, talk
What?
about a wild and crazy weekend.
I'm telling you, the whole week wasn't it?
It was just,
This whole week was so full of so many things. But, yeah, he is risen.
he is risen.
He is risen.
And
It is finished.
the
it is-
battle with Satan is over.
Is over.
We know
Yes.
that if we believe in Jesus, we will
Yes.
go to heaven because Jesus fought that battle for us on the cross.
Yes.
And so later on, Jesus did appear to his disciples. They
Yes.
were in a room all together again, and he appeared, and all of a sudden Jesus was there. He didn't come through a door or anything. So, but he showed him the spots and the wounds in his hands and his side and his feet where the nails and stuff were.
said-
It was really Jesus, but he had a new body, and it was one that wouldn't die.
But he
So-
also said, give me something to eat.
Yes. And didn't he have fish?
Yeah.
He had fish.
So there you go.
Yeah.
How about that? I mean,
So-
I couldn't, if that would be at my house, he'd come through, what? You're here and you're talking to me and you're showing me this? I would be like the soldiers, kaplop.
Yeah.
I'd be done. They'd have to come pick me up because I don't think I'd get that. I don't think I'd get that. I can
it
get
would
it
just
this way.
blow your
I can
mind.
get it this way because I'm told this for 78
We've
years.
learned it since we were, yeah.
Yes, and I believe it, and I know in my heart of hearts that's right.
But to have been there
to
and
have
to
been
witness
there,
that,
all
yes.
of it,
Wow.
all of it, the parade, the temple thing, the washing of the feet, the Lord's Supper, the prayer out in the garden. If I was Peter, James, or John, I would have fallen asleep too. I know I would have.
Oh,
and I would have.
absolutely.
I would have. I don't know if I'd have been Peter and cut the ear off. I don't know that.
And Peter
I
was
would hope
also the
no.
one who, while Jesus was being on trial,
Yes.
we didn't
Yes.
talk about that, but he was sitting by a fire, and one of the servant girls came along and asked him, don't you know Jesus? Aren't you one of his friends, his disciple? No, I don't know him. Somebody else came along and asked him, don't you know Jesus? No, I don't know him. And then a third person came and asked him the same thing, and he said, no, I don't know him. And Jesus had told Peter, before
Yes.
a rooster crows 3 times, you're going to say that you don't know me. You're going to deny me.
Oh, I'll never do that.
Never.
I'll never do that.
Peter, like we said, Peter was always just
Right.
gung-ho and get up and go. And
But I'm like Peter. When I have a chance to say, I know Jesus, do I say anything?
we don't always do that,
We
do
don't always do that. So we're not any different than Peter.
No.
And sometimes maybe we need a rooster to crow
Kind
and
of wake us up a
wake
little
us
bit.
up and say, listen,
Yep.
kids, listen, people. Yeah,
Yep,
he's
that
not.
rooster crowed, and Peter realized what he had done.
Yes.
And then he
Yes.
cried. He would cry and cried.
Right.
But Jesus forgave him.
Yes. Yes, he would forgive us too. True, without a
Yes.
doubt. But by the same token, there are so many symbols and so much
Just-
stuff in this whole thing. Yeah, kids, if you have your little storybooks, read it again. Find the time to read it. We talked about it earlier. We were practicing for church to play, Angie and I, and we said, how can this be Easter already? We just had Christmas. Yes, it just does seem like that, doesn't it? We talked about Lent a couple weeks ago, and that was supposed to be 40 days. It's all done. It's all done. And the thing we don't want to do is pass this by and not understand what this all means.
This is actually more important than Christmas is.
Absolutely.
I mean, Christmas is when Jesus came to us
Yes.
to come to earth.
Yes.
But if he hadn't done what he did on Easter when he came to earth,
Would have made no sense. Nothing.
Yeah, it would
Yeah.
be pretty sad for us.
Yes, absolutely.
Pretty sad deal.
Absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. So, I think, is there anything else
I was
left
gonna
in
say-
that story?
No, we may talk about what happened after that next time. There are a few things to do. I just couldn't limit myself. There were so many fun things to pick out from. So one of the things in your little
Yes.
packet is a little money pouch, like what Judas had.
Can
Maybe,
make that.
we don't know. It's a little envelope kind of thingy. And I did put the instructions in there. It looks like this when you start, and you got to follow these instructions to make it look like this. So, but that was kind of fun to do. Another thing is this is one of the Last Supper. It looks kind of funny like this, but this is kind of a folding project. You cut out on the dotted lines, and there's a little piece of bread and a piece of, or a little cup there, and you cut them out. And then you follow directions and you fold on the gray lines, and then you put your bread and your wine on there. And I don't know if you can see that, but there's a little picture of the Last Supper. Jesus in the middle. There's only 6 disciples there, but maybe there were some on the other side. So. But you get an idea what it might have been like.
And a fun thing to make.
Yes. And then there's one called
There's the
Holy
whole-
Thursday. We call it Maundy
Maundy
Thursday.
Thursday.
I like this. It says Jesus' Happy Meal. This Happy Meal doesn't look like much, and it doesn't come with a toy. It may not fill my stomach, but it fills my heart with joy. The bread and wine remind me of Jesus' love for me when he died upon a rugged cross on a hill called Calvary. There is no way I can describe the gratitude I feel each and every time I eat Jesus' happy meal. So maybe that's something to help you remember the Lord's Supper, the Last
Yes.
Supper. Sometimes we call it communion.
Communion.
It's called the different things, but there's bold words in there that you got to find in the little word search here, and then you can color all of that. And then when they got to the Garden of Gethsemane, here's a picture for you to color. You can see the disciples sleeping back here. It says how many stars, how many flowers. You got a little counting to do on that one.
For different ages.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Might work for some of the littler ones, and some of the bigger ones can handle the word finds and folding.
I
and
guess I
that kind of
didn't
thing.
put a lot in about the crucifixion because there's a lot of that in here when Jesus died and was on trial, carrying the cross, when he died, when they buried him, and then
Stone.
with the stone put in front, and then the women coming to the tomb, and then when he came to Mary Magdalene, and there's a picture of Jesus, and we're going to find out what happens to him after he rises again next time.
Yep.
And just a nice picture to color.
Yep.
So there's Jesus is a live maze. You have to get Mary Magdalene to Jesus at the tomb. And another word search, Jesus is alive. You're just going to have all kinds of fun with all this. And here's just kind of a little thing that kind of summarizes everything. Jesus joined his friends to dine at the Last Supper. And then in the garden, Jesus prayed, and he knew what he must do. And this says there is a green hill far away outside the city wall. That's Golgotha or Calvary. That's a song. And then 3 days later, he is risen indeed. And then some items that remind you of Jesus. You have to circle those. So there's some fun things to do in there. We're not going to read a story tonight because we kind of read from these 2 books, The Story of Easter. It is written by somebody, by Thomas Nelson and retold by Gwen Ellis. And then we also read from the Beginner's Bible, the very first Easter. And I know it's published by Zonder Kids, but who is the author? I'm not sure. The editor is Kristen Tuinstra, but I can't tell who the actual author is. So
we'll give her credit
We'll give her
today.
credit. But
We'll
if you
give
see
her
these
credit
are
today.
really nice books, and that's what we were using to tell the stories tonight. So, yeah.
Okay. Oh, Okay.
So on Easter,
Yes. Our happy Easter lilies are ready to bring in Easter Sunday morning. Oh, happy Easter Sunday morning. What a glorious thing. Now, we have one last surprise, don't we, Ange?
we do. This is
We
pretty
do.
cool.
Yep. Are you ready? Okay.
I
Let's
am.
see if I can get up. As you see, I'm dressed in black, all black.
That kind of goes with the somber tone of
Everything.
the whole week of
Yes.
being sad things,
Yes.
of this Last Supper and Jesus dying and everything. But that didn't last.
No. And in nature, there is something that reminds us of the tomb and of Easter Sunday morning when we're all singing, Alleluia, Christ is risen, all this kind of thing. And you know what that is? It's a butterfly. The butterfly comes from an ugly cocoon, ugly brown or black, whatever it is. And then it becomes a caterpillar. It goes through its little week of things, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. It's very hard for that caterpillar to get out of there. And then before you know it, there's a chrysalis. And then you know what comes out of that chrysalis? Well, let
breaks
Angie
its way
and I
out.
show you. I'm gonna take my black shirt off.
Can you figure it out? Start thinking. Think.
Now let's see which one is first. I don't know.
Oh,
I'm hooked somewhere.
this one.
This one.
This one
Okay.
first.
So, all right, I come out of that side.
She's coming out of the chrysalis.
I am coming out of the chrysalis. Now just hang on. I am going to become a great, big, beautiful. I'm going to become a great, big, beautiful butterfly. And with that, we're going to say Happy Easter to all of you.
Happy Easter.
In Butterfly Land. Till next time. Bye, kids.
That's
All right.
cool.
I think that did it.
That's cool.